Hello there, and welcome to Find Your Voice. My name is Joe Cramond, and today's episode we've got a very special guest, Jeevan Matharu. He is a wealth management partner and true potential LLP and transformational coach at Vanquish. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Joe.
No problem at all. So, if you want to just fill us in a little bit more on your background and what you have to offer and your experience, that would be wonderful for our audience.
Yeah, so two of probably five spokes to my itinerary, really. One is, as you said, rather a wealth manager at True Potential, and that's essentially helping people to retire with the assets they've built up over time. So predominantly people of 55 onwards who, as I've said, have worked throughout their life or had businesses, accumulated wealth, and now looking to decumulate that wealth and tax plan. So that's something that I've done since university, and that's sort of the career focus at that point. I've also started a business as a transformational coach. So that's to help people who maybe haven't got the right attitude, maybe haven't got the right mentality or a direction in life, to help people improve themselves. The reason that I started that endeavor was because for me, I was kicked out of school for poor behavior, but I had the intellect. I'm a member of Mentor. But what I realized is that it's not just about having the 6-litre engine, the V8. It's about how do you actually drive it? How do you use that to get the best out of it? So I've been helping people to get themselves on track or get to the next level through coaching. I've written a book as well about self-development, which essentially is covering a broad range of chapters, from goal setting to psychology to just a general self-improvement, to how to motivate yourself, and all these chapters that really help to create your best self and the best version of yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So they're probably the main three things. Aside from that, I do judo, which is a martial art for those who are not aware. It's very similar to jiu-jitsu in some respects, but it's more about standing rather than being on the ground. And I'm in the master squad for the UK, which is people over the age of 30. And I have been in the top 16 last year. So yeah, trying to use all those skills to help me to develop and become my best self. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into
that's great. Yeah, you've certainly got a lot of wealth of experience there. So we'll just let our audience know what we're going to do is ask you some quick fire questions just to go through and find out a little bit more about yourself as well. So the first question would be, and obviously you've described a lot of things you do and what you're a member of and how you position yourself. So this is probably going to be a big business card, but if you had one, what would it say? What would be your main title?
Well, improving people's position, essentially, because if we take all those 3 or 4 things that I've mentioned, retirement planning is helping people to use what they've built up to actually enjoy the rest of their life and retire. If they're coming to me for coaching, it's, well, how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? Because very different to like a counsellor, for example, who looks at past traumas and how they feel, etc. A coach is someone who looks forward and says, well, where are you now? Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years, and how do you get there? And again, same with the retirement side. It's, well, what have you got assets wise? What do you want your retirement to look like? How do I help you get there? So for me, it would be helping you get where you want to go.
Okay, that's very useful. Yeah, it's good. So why on paper should you have never been successful? And obviously you mentioned the schooling issues and the stuff like that. Same here, to be fair. So
yeah, I mean, I think with success is a long-term plan, isn't it? You think of a world champion boxer. He's been punched more times in the face than either of us, but he's the success because you have to go through a number of failures to realize what went wrong, what skills you developed along the way, what is the right way to do things, and actually if you're on the wrong track. So for me, it's failure is something to be sought after, and school really doesn't teach you that. School teaches you that failure is bad, working with others is bad, questioning authority is bad, but actually if you seek out failure and actually push beyond your boundaries, you will find that you become a better person overall. Because if you had let's say a goal of today just to walk down to the shop and get yourself a ham and cheese sandwich, that day would be a success. But is that really success in the grand scheme of things? So it really depends on what your goals and ambitions are and how close you are to it that determines what success is. Success, as Earl Nightingale puts it, is working towards a worthy ideal. Because for everyone, success is different. For some people, they want the Dan Bilzerian lifestyle with loads of women, etc. For
Mm.
others, they want a nice job that they enjoy doing and a family that they can look after. So
Yeah.
we need to find what our success is for ourselves, and then move on beyond that, essentially.
Oh, exactly. We had a previous guest on actually who talked about problems they've had with their heart from burnout. They had a heart attack, and so in a lot of ways, having good health is something to feel successful for, because you get into your 30s and 40s and 50s, and the health starts to decline. So if you're lucky enough to be healthy, I think that's also important as well to feeling successful. So yeah, it's a good point though, but. What if you're writing a script then about a movie about your life? How would you describe the opening scene? So, what would the opening scene be?
Well, it depends on how far that scene goes. But if we look at the first scene being all of school life, because with any sort of film or book or movie, the middle of the film is the most important part, isn't it? And the start and the end is as brief as possible to give as much credence to the middle of the film. And for me, it would be the school side of things, where obviously had the intellect, but with poor behaviour and poor attitude, didn't fulfil my potential at school. Still did very well, of course, but not quite getting there. And then how I can then change as an individual to try and achieve my potential over the period of my life, essentially.
Yeah.
Because for me, an attitude change is the key. For example, if you go to the gym and your goal is just to become slightly fitter than you are, just to lose a couple of kilos, you'll probably go to the gym once a week, because your goal is so low that it will dictate your behavior. If your goal is to become world champion, a weightlifter, your habits will be very different. You'll go to the gym for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And that's what it comes down to. It's how your mentality affects you. And as a kid, I didn't really have the mentality to deliver those goals or create those goals and then deliver those habits. Whereas now, I think I have got that in place.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Well, I'm all about goal setting because I used to compete as a bodybuilder a few years ago.
And that's
So
funnily enough.
yeah. Interestingly, yeah. So I competed around the country. Came second in Mr. Britain 2015. Won the Mr. West a few times, and so I'm totally on par with you on that one. The whole idea of having high expectations and high goal setting is tough, but it gets you there if you can fulfill those goals, definitely. And then you can transfer those skills into business and other parts of life as well. Because you've always got that structured mentality of digging in deep in the beginning, getting the foundations right in whatever you do, and then building up on that. So it's it's really valuable information there you've just given us. So if we asked, so going back to your school days then, because I was a bit of a rebel in school as well. Like if you asked 10 of your old schoolmates to describe you, how would they do that?
Well, I think I've changed over time, but at school it would have been entertaining, silly, but intelligent. But one thing I will say is that, and this is the sort of undertone really of that question, for every person you speak to, they will all say something slightly different about you, even if you feel that you are just yourself. Your relationship with 10 different people is slightly different. You might have a relationship with one person as a business person, and they might see your relationship and certain skill set. You might have a guy that you go down to have a few drinks with at the pub. You might have a guy who you go to train with, and all of those people will see a slightly different side of you, even though you are still the same person, essentially. So I think that depending on who those 10 people are, whether it's schoolmates or individuals, would determine or would be determined by your relationship with them. Is it your father? Are you the father? Is it your siblings? And I feel that would determine how you're viewed, and also the sort of skills and personality that is portrayed.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. So, what was a turning point for you then in school? So, you obviously, or after school, what was the turning point from your bad behavior days and rebellious sort of questioning of everything to sort of thinking, no, you know what, I need to now bring all of this wealth and knowledge and all these intelligent thoughts I've got and structure them so that I can get a clear path? What was your turning point, would you say?
Well, Jim Rohn says something very interesting. He says, frustration is looking for an above average job with above average pay without being an above average person. And that's the case for probably 90%, 95% of the population, where they're like, oh, I want a 100 grand job, but are they a 100 grand person? And what I came to realize is that it's not about chasing for things and being a shirker, trying to find the best job for least work and trying to get through life in that respect. It's about providing value. The more value you can provide, the more income you'll generate off the back of it. And if we look at Amazon, for example, everyone says, oh, well, I want a $1 billion business like Amazon or Microsoft. But can you provide pretty much any good at a reasonable price to be delivered the next day or within 24 hours? You can't. So if you can't do that, you don't deserve to have that value attached to you. Microsoft, obviously, the other one, so many businesses and probably everyone's computer has Microsoft on it, and they use Excel or Word, and because that provides value. So I came to the conclusion of, well, how can I provide more value, which is the focus that will then come and bring me success longer term. It's like with your Mr. Olympia or Mr. Western, whatever it was. You don't yes, you have the end goal, but your primary focus is, well, how's my day going to look? How's my diet going to look? Because if you just focus on those habits and the value that you're providing to your body, the end goal comes itself, doesn't it?
Yes.
If that makes sense. So 100%. We have to understand what we need to focus on, because there's no point in setting goals if you're not going to put in the daily habits, the routines, the discipline. If you're doing a marathon next year, you need to be able to structure your 12 months to run a mile, 2 miles a day, plan month 1, month 3, month 6 in order to get there. And that's what your focus will then be. It'll be the short-term focus for the long-term focus. The climbing of a mountain begins with a single step, as the Stoics say.
Yeah, exactly. Journaling is very good as well. Obviously, journaling every day in some form, whether it's written, by hand or whether it's on the computer, setting those daily tasks and stuff and just working and building upon that. So that's really interesting. So what was the last time you did something that scared you?
Well, going into competition can be scary in some respects. There's a risk of injury. There's a risk of obviously being hurt in some respects. So I think that would be one thing. But what I would say with that is that everyone wants to be courageous, don't they? Everyone's, I'm not Mr. Courageous. When they watch films, they look at characters and say, I really like that character because he's really courageous. And what courageous means is that you are scared or have fear, but you're still willing to do the activity. It doesn't mean that you have no fear. So for me, it doesn't matter if you're scared or you have fear. It's about still doing the thing anyway. And whether it's starting a business or going into competition or going to climb mountains in the snow, whatever it's going to be, the fear is going to be there, and it's your job to override that thought process, because we as individuals are generally look at the negative side as humans. And that's throughout the past that we had to look out for issues and animals chasing us and all the other stuff. But now we're in a position where life's fairly comfortable in some respects. There's a lower ceiling that no one can really go below, or lower floor. So we need to then change our mindset to start looking at positive things and looking at the optimistic side of life. So that's what I would say to that. There are many things that scare me or have scared me, but it's about still doing those things.
Having a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, as they say.
Absolutely.
So one, a little bit off topic, but procrastination, I think that's a big thing with people now. I think that they get an idea and then the idea keeps going around in their head, and then they talk themselves out of it, and then they talk themselves back into it, and then they try. So how would you overcome procrastination? What would be your top tip on that one?
Okay, so for me, there's optimistic and pessimistic thinking, and then there's carrot chasing and being hit by the stick. So if you're going to an endeavor, let's say you're starting a business, and you're going into the business thinking of all the negatives that can happen. Could go broke, could have to sell my house, could have to sell my car, could lose my friends, etc., etc. You're probably not going to undertake that business endeavor. If you go into the business endeavor thinking, well, what if it becomes successful and I get all of these new clients and income starts growing and I get a girlfriend and all this sort of stuff, you are more likely to then go into that business endeavor. So I think procrastination comes from not understanding and not looking at that future positive outcome. And the reason I've talked about the carrot and the stick is that for some people, they need the stick in order to discipline themselves to, look, stop procrastinating, let's get this done, which is fine. And that's a way that certain individuals work. For me, I work on the carrot chasing side. And if I think of, well, what would it look like if this comes true? That motivates me to move forward. So
Yeah.
that motivates me stronger than not taking action and procrastinating. Now, everyone procrastinates, whether they like to think it or not, even for a very short period of time. But it's about overriding that. And as I said, do you override that with the stick, trying to discipline yourself and say, look, you need to do this now because of the fear of this, or is it by chasing this?
Yeah.
And I'm the second, and that's what helps me to stop procrastinating.
Well, it's risk versus reward as well, isn't it? It's like take the risk, but then what's the reward? You've got to really weigh that up. I think with a lot of decisions you make in life is looking at that side of it. So that's really good, useful information. So when was the last time you had to leave something behind, and what was it and why?
I think it's your old self. You are constantly evolving and learning more about the world and yourself, and you have to adapt and change, and you're leaving your old self behind. And a lot of the times you don't want to do that because you liked your old self to some extent, but you have to give that up if you want to progress and move forward. Sometimes that means changing friendship circles, moving location, changing your habit set, changing your diet, whatever it's going to be. But we have to be willing to leave our old self behind in order to become the better version of ourselves. So I think that's probably what I would say on that front.
I think
Because in order to be better,
I think there's a book in that. I think there's a lot of information you could talk about with that one, because if you think about it as well, how many times in our lifetime, from an average span of sort of childhood to your elderly life, have you changed who you are? So could be dozens of times. You could look back and think 10 years ago, yeah, I wasn't the same person as I am today. And it's interesting that journey through life of how many different versions of yourself you become just from experiences and choices you make.
It's amazing. So you can think of music choice, you can think of even just basic things like hairstyles, how you dress. But then there's other things, what your interests are, how you prefer to spend your time. Did your extroversion and introversion change over time? Because that is something that also changes for people.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most extrovert people at school are now people who like to spend a bit more time alone and do all these things. So I've probably changed about 10, 15, 20 times at least. And that's just thinking about, oh yeah, what was my thought process at that point? But the more perspectives or the more things we go through in life, the more perspectives, or the more our perspective changes. And the bigger those things are, again, the more our perspective changes. So for someone who gets a job at McDonald's versus a guy who climbs Mount Everest, their perspective change is relative to how big that achievement is. So the more things we can put ourselves through, the more challenges we can undertake, will give us a clearer perspective over the long term. So for me, I try to, as you said, be bold, take some risks, because that then gives me a better perspective moving forward. And look, even if I fail, and I'll use an example of this, Peter Jones, the Dragon's Den. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He made like £250 million and lost it all and made it all back. Because yes, he can lose his money because of cash flow and bankruptcy, but what he doesn't lose is his skill set, his ability to network, his business nous, his determination, etc., etc. So even if people take away your money, they can't take away what you've built, and that's
the knowledge.
And the knowledge, because you can always go back to your old life. You start a business, doesn't work. Yes, you might be in a worse position financially, but you can always go back to your old life and get your old job back. It's whether you want to risk that that downside risk for potential, as you said, risk reward, the upside. Whereas the biggest risk is not taking any risks. Working a 9 to 5 at McDonald's. I don't know why I keep using McDonald's, but it's just a nice, easy one. There's no downside risk at all, but there's also no real upside risk either. There's no real upside. So for me, that's more of a risk, because you'll get to the end of life with no additional skill sets, no development, and nothing at the end either.
No, I mean, I suppose in some ways, though, it does depend on how you look at getting a job at McDonald's. If you think about it, if it's an 18-year-old, if they want to run their own restaurant, or they want to have their own fast food franchise, getting a job in McDonald's and then looking at the way things are done and then trying to then, figure out what they could do better potentially as an individual, that could be a way of using a job at McDonald's to kind of like make the best of it. But I know what you're saying. It's definitely, I think most people who, well, it sounds all to generalize, but I think people who generally take those sort of jobs is because they just need the cash. They're not there to grow their careers. Some
Yeah.
maybe, but you know,
I agree with you though. Depending on how you're looking at it, if you've got a longer term plan, that's fine. But as you said, for the most part, it's not the type of person that would do that. The
making
other
ends
thing
meet.
is, if you're in a lower paid job, you tend to work overtime and more hours. I mean, I've done it in the past. I was working 7 days a week for like 7 years. They weren't low paying jobs by all means, but I wanted the extra to be able to do what I wanted to do. And what I've realised is that working harder is not always the best thing, because you need solitude and you need time to think and strategize, create ideas. And when you're running on the hamster wheel, it's very difficult to actually generate those ideas. So the longer you're doing the extra hours and working overtime, sometimes that has a negative effect on your long-term growth, even though short-term you're earning an extra £100-200 a month.
Yeah, it's like working smart rather than working hard, isn't it? Is the best way. And they call them busy fools. You know, people who spend hours and hours and hours sort of doing something when it could be, with a little bit of thought, you know, cut down to a short period of time and potentially automated and stuff like that. But I could talk to you for hours, my friend. You've got some really good insights, and you're a great communicator. But we do have to wrap the show up. So I would like to ask you one final question. What 3 words would you want written on your epitaph?
So, courageous, interesting, intelligent.
No, I'd agree. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, it's been a wonderful conversation, Jeevan, and I really appreciate you offering your advice and insights to our audience. And just to let our audience know as well, if you wish to become a thought leader and you want to talk on podcasts and be in front of engaged audiences targeted to your talking points, then you can reach us at www.podcastguesting.pro. And you'll find more information on there about our services. And Jeevan, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your time. And hopefully, we'll speak again in the future. Just to let everyone know, if they want to reach you, what are the best platforms and avenues to do that?
So first of all, the book "Become a Person of Value" that's available on Amazon. I've got a second book coming out as well. That's, as you mentioned, a journal whereby there's predetermined questions. So where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years? And what compliments do I get regularly? That means obviously you're good at those. Loads of questions, one every day, that you can write down your answers into. That should be out in the next few months. The coaching, Vanquish Transformational Coaching. So people who want to, from some of the stuff we're talking about today, want to improve themselves and have a different perspective on things, get in touch. And then for people 55 and over, retirement, reach out there as well.
So, yeah, so not only do you help people grow, but then you help them rest afterwards and be able to relax and enjoy their success that they've made. So that's really valuable stuff. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you again soon, very, very soon.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. All right, and bye everyone. Thanks for listening.